The case of White Feather and Lens. Now, this is a case that is very egregious to begin with, and so we're going to touch on one portion of the story that I think many aren't looking at. There's another video that we have here that's we're going to talk in detail about the whole case in general, but we want to really harp on one. That would be the 5-year-old as part of this investigation. Now, what was said by both the children and on court records that the child, the 5-year-old, was treated with preferential treatment as opposed to the others. Was left alone, wasn't abused as much. So we had a thought, why? Why would those two people treat the 5-year-old differently? And we came up with a couple of scenarios that we want to put to you that may or may not make sense or may not be true. However, since we are in the dark as to why the 5-year-old be treated differently, I think we're quite okay to make these, well, wouldn't call them assumptions, guesses. One of those guesses would be that he was indeed trying to make sure that that 5-year-old was groomed the way he wanted them to act. Whereas the other ones were of age where they were already seasoned into the way they behaved. He probably thought, and so did she, that if they treated the child a certain way, that the child would gravitate towards them and do the things that they wanted more willingly. Now, that could be one option. The other is, hey, y'all, we have to treat you harshly. We have to whip you, beat you, isolate you, starve you, abuse you to get what we want out. But this 5-year-old seems a little more malleable. If we treat her really sweet and she could just join us as a family member, and then we can get what we want out of her physically. The other option is that they were touching the young child. There were stories of him being alone, the man, Lance, alone with her in rooms throughout the house at various times. Could it be that this was his love child, not in terms of having her, but using her the way he might have had for his own sick, perverted pleasure? If that be the case, that would explain exponentially why he would treat her differently. By associating good behavior and good treatment with what they were doing in isolation, the child would then start to reference him as the person of trust. You see, the child would now look at him and say, he cares for me more than the rest of them. It must be I'm either a good person or he loves me more, and I will be more inclined to do what he wants, even if it comes at the expense of something uncomfortable. The other third option is this. He was doing it as an affront to the others, to make sure that everybody in the house was living in a position of not just fear, but worry. I will do what I need to do with your 5-year-old sister and continue to doing what you got to do. And if you don't, I do this to her. On the surface, I'll treat her nice. If you do what you got to do, I will treat her nice. If you don't, I'm taking her by herself and I'll do what I got to do. Now, were the children aware? One at least was. The 18-year-old was quite aware that this was happening, at least the isolation portion of the 5-year-old's life. He was keeping her on occasion by herself with him, doing we don't know. But could it be that he was using her as leverage? Using her to show the rest of them, if you don't act right, you know the person who's going to pay? Not just you, but her. The whole story is so crazy. The truth is so hidden at this point. Thankfully, the kids are speaking and there were cameras in the house. And hopefully the investigations that are going on will come to get to the bottom of it. What we still are yet to find out is whether or not that the court system on the side of the adoption will be dealt with too. This is not just the parents we're talking about, the adoptive parents. We're talking about the system as a whole needs to be addressed as to how they managed to give these kids over to begin with. But we digress to that 5-year-old. If indeed one of those three scenarios was at least afoot, it's very bad news for that 5-year-old. People might say, well, she wasn't abused. In my case, I see it more as worse. To be used as a scapegoat, to possibly be shown more favoritism over your siblings, and then have your siblings hate you. That I think that might be a little bit worse. Or even to be used sexually, it might be just as bad. Since we don't know, but we do know that he was treating her better, there might be some other reasons afoot. There might be something way more heinous. And if that is the case, I do hope it comes to light. Maybe the kids saw something that they can tell, if they can remember. Hopefully it doesn't get swept under the rug as a traumatic response and that's not a real memory, and they'll tell them, well, maybe you didn't see what you saw, and because that's happened before. Hopefully everything the children say is believed, because so far what has happened to them is documentable. It's on camera. It's there. It's not hearsay anymore. But that 5 year old seems to be the linchpin throughout all of it. The preferential treatment could be good or it could be bad. It could be leverage. And it could be that this man and this woman were using that child in very, very disgusting ways. Not sure if the 5 year old is speaking, not sure if she'll say anything, not sure she'll be believed. But I do hope that she is listened to and that her case is taken to in consideration when it comes to this punishment that they're going to hand to these two people. Did they have a fetish for the younger child? Were they using her as leverage over the rest of the family? Or were they simply just trying to make it look like she was the least abused when in fact she was the most? Time will tell, and we'll keep an eye on this case and keep you abreast as to the final result.